You are officially invited. Yes, you're invited to join us in Fertility Awareness Mastery Live. This is my 10-week group coaching program designed to help you gain confidence using fertility awareness. Whether you're actively avoiding pregnancy or looking to optimize your cycles for conception, we have a spot for you. We start the first week of May. Are you ready to jump in? Head over to fertilityfriday.com/fam to register today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAM. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 413. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast, your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm your host, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. I'm the author of The Fifth Vital Sign and the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Journal. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner with nearly 20 years of experience teaching women to connect to their fifth vital sign through menstrual cycle charting, balancing hormonal health, and optimizing the menstrual cycle without hormones. I'm outspoken about hormonal birth control and its impact on fertility and overall health because you have the right to know how your body works and how artificial hormones disrupt that natural process. I teach women's health professionals how to utilize the menstrual cycle as a vital sign in their practices, and I host live coaching programs to help you achieve optimal fertility and health, because it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles regardless of whether or not you want to have babies. I'm also a wife and mother of 2 beautiful boys. I know, I'm a busy girl, but I managed to fit it all in. This podcast is designed to empower you to take full control of your cycles, your fertility, and your overall health. And I'm so excited that you're here with me today. Today I'm sharing a brand new episode in my Fertility Awareness reality series. I'm sharing my conversation with Carter, and in today's call, I feel like we cover a lot of ground. One of my favorite parts of these episodes is kind of at the very beginning when I have an opportunity to ask about their first menstrual period, and I think over the years, it's just been very interesting to hear different experiences that women have when they start menstruating and how that kind of plays into their experience of menstruation up until, their 20s and 30s and things like that. And we also touch on a sensitive topic, which is painful sex, and delve into some of the reasons why that can happen. And I think on the podcast often, in previous episodes where this topic has been touched on, it's often birth control related. And whether or not that's the case, we're not 100% sure. But it's often been on the podcast birth control related, whether it's the use of birth control has changed the hormonal profile, which can then thin the vulvar tissues and create a situation where sex is more painful. But in today's episode, we talk about some of the other reasons why sex can be painful, potentially related to jumping in too fast and not necessarily taking enough time to warm up. So I feel like today's episode is a great reminder in the physiology of the female body, if you will, and the differences between men and women, especially when it comes to the arousal cycle and lubrication and all of these things that take time, and really giving yourself permission to take that time if you need it and to not to feel bad about it. I think that as we get into in the episode, I do think that the media and the porn industry has really made a negative impact by setting just completely unrealistic expectations of what intimate interactions between 2 people are supposed to look like. And I think it can create a lot of pressure on women to either perform a certain way or to have be on a certain timeline or deadline or whatever the case. And so that's one of the topics that comes out in today's call, and we really delve into it and talk about some potential strategies and solutions for moving forward. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode with Carter. And I'm excited to be here today with Carter. Carter is a member of my current Fertility Awareness Mastery Live program. And at this stage, I think we're about halfway through. So we've had a hot seat together. So we've gotten to know each other a little bit. So welcome to the show, Carter.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
Well, thanks for being here. I always say not everyone wants to have these, private, public/private conversations on blast. So it's a real treat to have you on the show. And I know my clients love these episodes and I love them too. So, I mean, as per typical Fertility Friday style, I would love to start just by asking you how old you were when you had your first period and, what that was all like, if you have a history of birth control, and if you, basically what brought you to want to do fertility awareness now.
Yeah, well, I had my period probably around about like 13 years old. I remember most vividly getting it and like being like, oh shoot, I have to tell my mom. And really not wanting to tell her, being pretty embarrassed about it, but then she'd be pretty mad if I didn't tell her. So I think we were on like a ski vacation or something, and I like pulled her aside and told her I got my period, and she was like, oh shoot, no, like, oh, I thought we had a couple more years, like, oh, what a bummer. And I was like, oh, like, oh, I didn't know this was something to be like super like sad about. But looking back on it, makes a lot of sense because she's had like really bad, painful periods like her entire life. It's been like a big inconvenience for her, but that definitely set the stage for how I viewed my menstrual cycle through my teens, of like it being a big inconvenience and feeling pretty like embarrassed by it. And I had pretty bad cramps from the very beginning, like my first period. I remember like being in middle school and just being like miserable in class. But as I got older, I went on hormonal birth control at like, I want to say age 18. It was like my first serious relationship. And I didn't really want to go on it at all. I think felt like I didn't have another option. I felt like I was like just getting used to my cycles, like they had regulated. I was like used to like I'd get cramps right around the same time, and I'd know that's when I was going to get my period. And like based on how heavy the cramping was, I knew how heavy my period would be. So I was like just getting used to it. And then I had this relationship and didn't know what to do to prevent pregnancy. And so it was also like the only thing I knew about the pill was that like you gain a lot of weight is what everybody said if you went on it. I was like very conscious of my weight during that time too. And so I decided that it was worth it and went on the pill. And I was on it for about 5 years. And honestly, it worked like pretty great for me. I didn't have any like major side effects that I knew of at first. I'd say like around 2019, 2020, I had like some digestive problems that started when I was in my freshman year of college. And I think that was probably due to some like really stressful events as well, but then started thinking maybe it had to do with hormonal contraception. And so I started having this feeling that like I wanted a break from the synthetic hormones. And how I got into fertility awareness is that one of my friends was actually hosting a webinar on the menstrual cycle, and I decided to participate and was like floored about everything I learned about the menstrual cycle and like what hormonal contraception can do. Like I think the most like in a awe moment I had was when I learned that it like can shrink your clit. And I was like, what? Like I just started having sex and like so like I never knew what like it could feel like. Maybe I never will know what it could feel like. I was so pissed. But and that's kind of how I guess it led up to where I am today. And I feel like I just really want to have a better understanding of my body and my menstrual cycle, and pretty active. I like to run a lot. And so I've gotten really into like athletic training and timing it in regards to my menstrual cycle. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely love this part, and I'm like a broken record over here, but in our hot seat sessions and in our other calls, it's not that you really have the opportunity to kind of just share your story like that, more of like a story format, like how you would just tell it. And so I always enjoy it because I feel like it helps to flesh out just some of the little details. And so let's go back to your mom's response. I think that's really interesting. And I think it's also interesting how you said that it clouded your own experience with your cycle, because it sounds like you weren't expecting that. You were kind of I wouldn't really expect that either. And thinking about it, I mean, what you said, she probably didn't have the greatest experience with it. And then on the other hand, I'm thinking you were 13. So actually 13 is the average age. And when I don't know what your friend situation was like, but I mean, my first friend had her period in fourth grade, I think. And I was kind of last. So I got my period when I was 14. And I remember feeling that like most of the people I knew already had it. And I'm kind of like looking at my watch, like what's going on here? And I know there was a couple, like one girl who I'm friends with, who I know she got hers when she was 16, which is late. So
Yeah.
it's kind of surprising, even from that standpoint, that your mom was kind of like, oh, I hoped we had a few more years, because it's pretty much around the time when most women are getting it, around 13.
Right. Yeah. I thought that was interesting too, because I think most of my friends had their period at that point. And so it wasn't something super talked about at school. At that point, and I think, I don't know, my sex education was like terrible. But yeah, it definitely caught me off guard, and like had a lasting impression, I guess, on just, I mean, I think just all my friends too, like really thought of the menstrual cycle as like a big inconvenience. And I feel like as more, the IUD became more popular, and like taking the pill consistently, like not even having that withdrawal bleed, like people were talking about like not even needing to have a period, which I now just think is so fascinating, because it, as you talk about all the time, like it can be used as like a fifth vital sign. It's such a window into your overall health that it's crazy to think about not having. And I remember that when I didn't know that when you were on the pill, like you took those little sugar pills, like that was a withdrawal. I thought it was your period, but I remember there was one time where I decided to skip it for some reason, and my whole body just felt like weird, like not having that bleed. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And when it's interesting too, because when you first said that, I thought that, so you were like, she was like, oh crap. I thought it was like, we're on our ski vacation and I didn't bring anything. I literally was waiting for you to say that. That's not what you said. So I probably wasn't the only one, but really interesting. And I mean, I'm like, I wouldn't, it's not saying anything negative about your mom. I feel like that's a very typical,
No, yeah.
like, I feel like it's a very kind of like a typical kind of response, like, oh man, now you have to deal with this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Have you talked to her about it since? Like, have you ever like talked about it now that you're grown up and all of that?
No, I haven't. I should bring that up someday, but
It'd be
it would
interesting to see what
it
she
would be
says now.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She's frustrated now because she's in her like late 50s and still has like really heavy period and all that. So I don't know. I'll be wait a couple of years.
Yeah. Her experience probably wasn't the greatest. Yeah.
No.
Well, and so one of the topics, I mean, I get a lot of questions around coming off birth control. So it sounds like you took the pill, for a while, obviously like 5 years approximately. And so you said your cycles had kind of regulated and you had kind of gotten into that groove. And that's something I talk about a lot too on the show, just in terms of the timing when you come off of the pill or when you start taking it and how that could affect your experience when you're coming off. So there is a bit of a difference from in your situation when you actually went on it when you needed it. You weren't put on it for, acne or irregular cycles or whatever. So your cycles were just able to kind of do their thing, normalize, regulate. And in a sense, from that perspective, you were like a good candidate. You had some pain, but you didn't have this horrible situation in that sense. So tell us a little bit about the decision to come off. So a lot of women are terrified. So probably, there's a few women listening right now who are literally listening because they're just like, how does this work? And when I was young, I've said this a lot of times, I was taught that condoms worked. And so I didn't have, of course I had a fear of getting pregnant, but it wasn't the same kind of level as it is now. So how did you deal with that? Like, were you scared? And then did you do anything, or did you just like make up your mind and come off?
I was definitely really hesitant. I think I started having that feeling where like I wanted to get off of it and take a break, like probably a year before I decided to actually come off the pill, because I was and still am in like the same relationship. So I definitely grew up being told that condoms were not like a good option and that they didn't work. So I didn't feel like there was another option. So I definitely was at a loss of what to do. But then once I found fertility awareness, it was a bit of a journey with my partner to like, I think at first he was kind of like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, and had a hard time trusting the method, which is funny now because he's so on board and like can tell you about all the different phases of the menstrual cycle. And like,
Awesome.
but I definitely I was, yeah, it's hilarious. Like always talking about cervical mucus and like, so it's great. But I definitely found your podcast and was listening to it for like months ahead of time, like listening to similar episodes of people like learning about the experience of like what it's like to come off of it. But once I made that decision, it wasn't anywhere near as scary as I thought because we were super conservative and used condoms. And yeah, I didn't have any like super negative side effects coming off of it. I still have digestion problems, and maybe we can get to this later, but one of my big questions for you is also like the libido. It's been something since I've come off the pill I've been noticing.
Like more so, or more so than when you
Yeah,
used it.
yeah, more so. And like pretty consistently since, so I guess I've almost been off of it for 2 years. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then just a couple other questions along these lines. So when you did come off of it 2 years ago, how long did it take for your period to return?
It returned about a month. It was pretty regular. It came, I think it took a month and then my cycle came back. I'd read a bunch of books before, like trying to prep myself. And so I did start taking supplements and like following kind of a strict diet for like, I'd say I stuck with it for like 3 weeks. And I don't know if that helped or not, but so I tried to be mindful beforehand.
Well, and I'm asking all these questions for like because I get all these questions, and I just recently released an episode where I talked about coming off the pill. So it's on my mind because I do get a lot of these kinds of messages. So bear with me. But other question, because I think one of the big fears, like there's a lot of fears, and I've started to realize this. And I think when I first got involved in this work, I just didn't think of it that way because my experience had been so different. You know, I just came off of it. I didn't, but at the same time, I had done that a couple of times, but not for the same reason. So when I was using the pill, I didn't use it. I wasn't using it for birth control at the time. And so I was using it for pain and for heavy periods, dealing with that. So I would come off of it every now and then just to see, because I thought I was fixed. And then it like my actual period would be totally different. From that perspective, when it was time to come off, it didn't really occur to me. So I think some of the fears, obviously, like, when am I going to get my cycle back? And am I going to be able to like know when I'm ovulating and when my period's coming, like that kind of question. But I think the other one people are really afraid of is the post-birth control syndrome. I mean, I typically don't use that language a ton. I know it's super popular and it's a big topic, and I know it's a real thing. Also, I don't know that I would go so far as to call it a syndrome. I would think of it more as like a transition phase when your body's rebounding. So it's like more of just a language issue for me, but it's a real thing. And so some women are scared that they're going to have a rebound of really bad PMS, emotional issues, feeling unbalanced, acne coming back, just all kinds of random stuff. Were you scared of those kinds of things as well?
Yeah, I definitely, in regards to the like cramping with periods, it definitely, when I was on birth control, the cramps lessened. So I was worried that was going to come back full swing. But something like really interesting happened, and I actually went the opposite way. So like within that first cycle, I stopped having cramps like altogether. I have no idea why. I'm really curious about that because I mean, it's a great thing. Can't complain. It was like really stoked about it. But like now I don't get any cramps with any, like for the past 2 years, I haven't had any cramps really at all. And it's pretty funky because I'll like be bleeding really heavily and not know it. So the opposite happened for me, which was which was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't always happen that way, obviously.
No.
And I mean, that's an interesting topic. It would be, and you know, I think we didn't have time to talk about that issue in our first hot seat together.
Yeah.
And we could certainly kind of explore that a little bit. To be honest with you, like off the top of my head, you know, I'm not sure exactly why. I would wonder if there were certain factors, maybe when you were younger, maybe a certain way you were eating, or if things were kind of different, if there was anything. You mentioned you changed your diet and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if any of those types of things apply in your case. But one thing, at some point, I'm not sure if we'll get to it this call, but at some point in the class, we'll go through some period pain management strategies, because as a person who experienced a lot of period pain, it's nice to have a grace period. But if you ever did start to get cramps again, it would be nice to have a bit of a strategy, so you don't kind of feel like,
for sure,
because it's kind of like, what did I do?
Yeah.
And so yeah. And I'm trying to think if I had any other questions, but I think that was it. So ultimately, though, you did make the decision, you did come off. And so far, the condoms have been working and fertility awareness made it easier. And that's one of the things that I found as well. I found that knowing your cycle and knowing you're not fertile all the time takes a bit of the pressure off. And then if you are approaching it conservatively, meaning not having unprotected sex in the pre-ov until you're comfortable doing that, then yeah, like it's totally doable.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me know if there's any other parts of your story that you'd like to share. Otherwise, we can switch up to the kind of session part of our session today.
No, I think I'm ready to switch.
Cool. All right. Well, so where would you like to start? Last time we talked about some of the challenges that you were having in a different area coming off of contraception. But did you have any questions for today? Did you want to dive into the period pain issue or other things?
I think my main question has to do with the low libido and the pain with sex. And that was something that I've spent more time thinking about. So I've had some developments, some like hypotheses, if we want to talk about that.
Okay.
But those are, my two main things.
Well, so we can start with the pain with sex. So in our previous session, so if I remember correctly, you didn't have that issue. And then ironically, you came off of contraceptives and then started having that issue.
Yeah.
And so in our last session, I asked you a series of questions just to try to help determine, could it be a hormonal issue related to the pill, or could it be a physical issue related to, the time of the cycle and things like that. So you said that there's some new developments. So what have you learned so far?
Well, I guess I spent some time really thinking, because I haven't been able to find a pattern in regards to like when in my cycle I'm having that pain. So I'm curious if I had like a not so great relationship before the one I'm in now, and so like the sex is a little bit weird, and so I'm curious if it's a kind of a mental thing potentially paired with like when I came off of hormonal contraception, maybe my cervix, like the position of my cervix changed. I don't know if that's possible, but yeah, just funky to me that no change in partner, no change in like the way we were having sex or anything, but change in pain. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, one of the possibilities when you're on the pill, you're not having a cycle, spoiler alert. And so you're not experiencing the cyclical cervical changes that you would be when you're not on it. So that's one possibility. I would say that, generally speaking, if you think about it, then you would expect, if it was something related to that it could be cyclical, that you would notice at least we're not robots, so it wouldn't be so specific. But I have had a number of clients who do find that sex feels more uncomfortable after they ovulate, because that's when the cervix tends to be lower. Yeah. And then around ovulation, it's a little bit better. That's something that would be different off of the pill. But when we talked about it didn't, I think that there was two things. One, you hadn't really seen a pattern so far. And then another, I think you mentioned your partner like works away sometimes. So you're not always together kind of thing.
Right. Yes. We aren't always together, which has been hard for tracking it. But in regards to, I was like looking back at all my charts, because I've tried to like make notations on like when it's painful and when it's not. And there hasn't seemed to be a pattern between like when he's here and it's pre-ov and when he's here and it's post-ov, or like during ovulation. But there have been random times when it hasn't been painful. So yeah.
Well, and your comment about your experience before with your past partners. So, I mean, that could be complicated. So the first thing that came to mind is that if there were, and I'm kind of going blind here because I'm not sure exactly what the situation was, but if there was a situation where it just wasn't that great. And so a couple of examples of what that could mean is that it's not like, I don't know. But if we're not going to put out your business out there like that, but I'll just give a couple of like possible scenarios, maybe hypothetical, and then just to give a little context. So it could be something that you don't get the opportunity to warm up enough. You kind of, or you feel like pressured, or it's like when you don't want to do it kind of thing. So in a scenario like that, so one, let's say you do actually want it, like you're good, you're turned on, like you want to go, but you're not necessarily having a long enough lead up time to penetration, for example.
Right.
That in of itself can then lead to kind of what, like, if you just picture that kind of situation, then you would be tense and you would start to like anticipate that it would be not great and potentially tighten up. And that can make it worse. So, right. And then in a example B, when you don't really want to do it, but you feel like you need to, and again, I'm just making this stuff up. I don't know if that has anything to do with your situation, but you don't really want to do it, for example, in option B. But your partner is kind of pushy. I'm sure that there's plenty of women listening who've had that situation.
Yeah.
And so kind of jerky, just call it out for what it is, if that's what's happening. Yeah. So then you're doing it, but you don't really want to. So that doesn't help, because if you're not even legitimately warmed up, then that is going to make it less enjoyable if you're not wet enough, if there's no lube involved or whatever. And then again, what can happen, and now outside of any particular situation like that, is that you could maybe be tight. And by tight, what I mean is nervous. And so you're not like relaxed. There's a completely different thing happening when you're really excited, really warmed up, really lubricated, and like you're ready, versus when you're not ready and kind of on the fence and you don't really want to do it, but you kind of feel like you have to, or that's just how it has always been. Cause I mean, I wonder all kinds of things all the time.
Yeah.
Cause this is what I do for a living. And so I often wonder, especially with younger women, I think that a lot of us grow into our autonomy and our comfort with demanding what we want. And I don't know how, it's been a long time since I've been like a 20 something, but I feel that the world is different now. I feel that there's a lot of, I'm just kind of going on so stop me if it's annoying, but I feel like there's a lot of porn out there, and I feel like it really puts this idea, many problematic ideas, not just one. So one of the problematic ideas is that women are just ready to go like men are. So for the male sexual arousal cycle, it starts when he has an erection, and then he's good to go. But for females, we have we do have kind of an equivalent kind of thing to an erection. Like we do have, the clitoris does expand and fill with blood, and the clitoris extends internally beyond what we can see. And so there is, but obviously it's inside. So we don't have that. And so for women, the normal sexual arousal cycle is not just like penis is up and we're thrusting. Like that's just someone's fantasy that's not real. So anyways, I wonder how these things come into play. And when we're younger, I wonder how many women feel quite comfortable with their male partners to say, no, I don't like that. No, I don't want this position. No, I'm going to need some warm up time before you penetrate me. Or like, that's obviously that's not how you're going to say the words in the moment, but like, I'm going to need some more time before we do this. Right. How comfortable. So anyways, I just threw out a bunch of stuff. Let me know if any of it's stuck, and like, if any of those scenarios or whatever could be a possible factor.
Yeah. I think you're like hit the nail on the head in regards to like women feeling, I think it is hard. It's hard to like slow it down when you need it to slow down, and to vote, like, I don't know, to have a stronger voice. And I think, yeah, I'm curious. I feel like a little embarrassed because I mean, I like went to the doctor to try to figure out this pain. Like I was like so confused by this pain and like why I was having it. And so now I'm realizing that like maybe it is as simple as that I'm not ready, but I think I should be ready. And so I guess I want to share it because I want, if there's like anybody else in my shoes that's like so confused about that, I want them to like hear this, that like it could be that like your partner is just like hitting your cervix and it's uncomfortable and it doesn't feel good. But I'm just curious as to why that switch happened then. And it probably does. Maybe it just has to do with it, like a history of that happening over and over and over again. And so maybe it's just an accumulation that at this point, maybe I'm just like tense. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. So obviously I don't have an exact, like, this is exactly why you're like, I don't have that. So really I'm trying to help you just to fact find.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what hormonal contraceptives do make a difference. And I've talked a lot about the studies around it and how about 50% of women have side effects, often sexual side effects. So the most common side effects are sexual side effects and then the emotional side effects. So like depression, libido, anxiety. And so one of the reasons that happens, so going back to the the science part of it, is that when you're on hormonal contraceptives, the primary mode of action is suppressing ovulation. And so when ovulation is suppressed, it suppresses our natural production of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. So what happens is, regardless of the side effects you experience, so with the pill, there's a certain hormonal thing that happens to everybody. And then the fallout, how you experience that as an individual, is a separate issue. So everybody on the pill has about 50% or more less testosterone, free testosterone, than is available when you're not on it. And so there's a combination of less being produced. And then there's a protein called SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. And I explain that as like a magnet and iron filing. So it really kind of absorbs the free testosterone. So there's just overall less. And so as women, what that means for us, so women make significantly less testosterone than men. So we make like 90% less than they do because we're, different. But right. But that little bit that we make is essential for our normal sexual function. So having that testosterone helps us to have a libido, and it helps us to have a really heightened sensation in that area. And so one of the possibilities, and I don't know if this is applying, I'm going to put it out there, is that when you're on birth control, this is one of the reasons why some women, not all, have a harder time to orgasm and have a harder, even reduced sensation. It's time, ladies. Time to take your fertility awareness knowledge and confidence to the next level. Just popping into today's episode to invite you to join us for the next round of Fertility Awareness Mastery Live. My 10-week group coaching program is designed to help you unlock the secrets of your menstrual cycle. Fertility Awareness Mastery teaches you everything you need to know about using fertility awareness cycle tracking to achieve your intentions. Whether you're currently trying to get pregnant, avoiding pregnancy, or planning to conceive in the future, we've got you covered. This program goes deep. Get to the root of your period problems, hormone imbalances, fertility challenges, and so much more. Early bird registration is now open, but only for a limited time. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/fam to register today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAM. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode.
Yeah.
And this is one of my, I have 1,000 questions. I'm always full of questions.
Yes.
So one of the other questions that we don't have answers to is, if you go on the pill right around the time you start having sex, right, do you ever know what the full sensation would actually feel like?
Right. That's them, which is like, I'm so interested in that, because that's like also hitting the nail on the head. Like that's me. Like I definitely am like have a hard time orgasming. Like I'm curious if that, and I don't know beforehand because I wasn't having a lot of sex before I went on the pill.
Well, exactly. So this is one of those questions that we won't have the answer to. So right. So if you are on the pill, and we know, and it's not, again, I didn't make this up. Like you can read the research that testosterone can thin the lining. It can shrink the clitoris. There was a study, and yes, it was a small sample size. I've had people all up in my grill, like, it's a small sample size. You can't talk about it. I can talk about it because they had a small sample size. Yes. But every single woman in that particular study had a reduction of the clitoral volume, and the average was 20%. So I say, okay, so yeah, it's not a big sample size. We can't make broad generalizations, but where's the follow-up study? Like, why hasn't that been done? There's like literally 100 million women on the pill. Right. You can find, but they don't want to fund it because they can't fund the study that shows that it shrinks their clitoris and then have an actual proper sample size to show that this is a thing that happens all over the place. Because it's just not good PR.
That like no one knows about either. Yeah.
Don't forget that these companies make money, billions. Like, it's, so with that said, I don't say these things to scare anybody. But we're adults, right? So we have the right to know how this works. So one of the possibilities could potentially be that maybe the sensation was a bit reduced. Maybe you were also young. Maybe our culture doesn't gear things to women's pleasure and satisfaction. And so maybe you were doing it the way he liked it. And then when you came off of it, then now you have a full profile. Your testosterone does kick back up. So it does, the sensations it is a real thing. It is possible that when your hormones are in full swing, like when you have optimal estrogen production, progesterone, et cetera, that you could have a greater sensation. The orgasms could be better. The sensation could be better. These are things that are like, they're real. So, I mean, that could potentially be working against you, but I don't know if that's the issue. I'm just kind of putting it out there as like, this is what I know about how the pill affects your hormones and how that could affect your sexual response. And so these are the possibilities, but we're not really sure what it is. And we're not trying to minimize this. So the first thing, I think that one of the first things that we talked about was certainly making sure you do get checked out by like someone who works with, whether it's a pelvic floor physiotherapist or whether it's your medical doctor. Like, you always do want to double check these things. So by no means is this the first thing I'm saying to someone who tells me they have painful sex. It's not about me saying like, oh, but those things you did very proactively. And so we have to kind of explore these options. So pulling it back to the sexual response, that is something that is tricky, especially when you're with a partner who you've been with, meaning that you've always been doing things a certain way. But at the end of the day, I'm going to stand on my soapbox, like public service announcement. From one woman to the next. Sex is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to feel good. It's supposed to be a way to bond, a way to connect. And it's not supposed to hurt, period.
Yeah.
And it's not okay, period. So like, imagine if someone was shaking your hand with like a thumbtack in there, you know, and you shake their hand, you'd be like, get your hand off me. So why is it that we're okay with the sex hurting?
Right. That's the question for a long time, I was just like, oh, like, what is this? This is weird. Like, and I was just trying to like ignore it. But then I was like, wait, this is like actually impacting my like desire to have sex. Like, this is not, why am I just putting up with it?
So you're definitely not the only one. Like I don't need to interview everybody who's listening to know that. But at the end of the day, like this is, again, I have my own opinions about this kind of thing. So they're strong, like everything else. And I do think that this whole porn culture messes it up for women because it sets this expectation that we're supposed to just be there. And when he's aroused, we're supposed to like, cause it literally, like, I don't watch porn. I can't handle it, but I've seen, obviously I've grown up. So I've seen some porn, but I don't watch porn and I can't handle it. I've seen like the crazy, like 90s stuff where it's so dumb and like, a lot more tame. Now I'll just say it. Now, a lot of the porn is straight up rape. And I think that is a huge, huge problem because I don't know what that does to people, meaning that I don't know what it does. Because I mean, if you're I'm going on a tangent, so forgive me. But it's like, if people are watching stuff that's so egregious, then when you're with your partner and they're like a little bit uncomfortable, I always wonder if that makes you think that that's fine. Yeah. But either way, that stuff aside, I think, what are some strategies? Like, let's bring it back to the practical. So we can say, okay, hypothesis B, maybe this is related to the arousal cycle. Maybe you're not getting warmed up enough, right? Like maybe that's the reason. So if that's the case, then a couple things you could try to see if that's it, because it could still be something else. But if that's what it is and that's what you're thinking, then what we would do, I mean, you would want to have a conversation with your partner. Like, have you guys had a conversation about this?
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot, I guess. And I think, it's just continuing that conversation probably.
Well, that's good. So the communication's open.
Yeah, the communication's there. The conversation's there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then I think that from a practical standpoint, it's a little tricky because it's again, there's this idea that it's supposed to just happen, right? We're not supposed to talk about it. We're just supposed to fall into bed and it's supposed to be wonderful. But sometimes you gotta talk about it. So whether that's beforehand or in the moment, maybe the way I could talk about it, I think this is how I talk about it too when it comes to managing the fertile window. It's like, what's on the menu? So we know there's intercourse, right? But there's also other options. And what are you comfortable with? And so, I mean, maybe it's a situation where you give it like the good old college try, as they say, where you literally have like a special time, but reserve a period of like an hour or two. Yeah. So not just racing before work or racing before bed, but make a point where we're going to have a sex date on Saturday or whatever, and make a point of, spending some time and I'm not trying to make it weird, right? But make it like have some time so that you don't feel rushed, do whatever needs to happen in order to like from cheesy to whatever floats your boat, candles, I don't know, music,
Yep.
I don't know, but do something, right? And then so that it's a little bit more intimate, and make it so that it's not that the sex part doesn't, like the actual intercourse penetration part doesn't happen for at least half an hour. So whether that's like a nice body massage or whatever, be creative, but starting with non-penetrative sexual activity. And yeah, I mean, do something like that, but like, again, for a period of time.
Yeah.
And maybe make it all about
actually,
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe make it all about you. I mean, what I always say, the guy always gets off. I mean, not always. Okay, I know, but 90% of the time, 95, 98, 99.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So like, come on. In class, I had recommended that book, She Comes First, which is getting at my point.
Yeah, great book.
I don't know. So think about that, have a think after a call, have a conversation with your partner and just kind of like, can we just try it differently? I just want to see if it could be this. This is something that's been bothering me. And so I'm wondering if we did it like differently and we just held off on the sex part for a bit longer, if we can, if that would make it more comfortable for me, more enjoyable for me, etc. And if he's a good guy, which I think he is, he's going to be totally for it. Because I mean, most men just are happy to be in the same room with you and have you take off your clothes. Anyway, so that would be kind of the first suggestion, because then you can have that opportunity to see if that makes a difference, so that you really are not moving forward until you're so comfortable, like until you're so ready, until you're just like dying for it. Like, yes, now.
Right.
And see if that because it might not, but it might. And if it does, if it makes a big difference, if you notice it's like totally different, then that could be a hint that, okay, maybe this could be the issue. The other thing that I think is really important in general is to do whatever it is that you need to do to feel comfortable saying stop or saying, because it's difficult in a loving relationship, because it's not the same as scenario B or whatever my hypothetical scenario was, when the guy's kind of a jerk and you don't really want to do it. But it sounds like it's a situation where you do want to do it, and you feel like you should want to do it. But I think that at the end of the day, it should be fun. It should never hurt. And it should be fun every time.
Yeah.
And you're not obligated to do anything. At the end of the day, I mean, it's not ideal, obviously, but no one dies if you have to stop and he doesn't get to finish with you. No one dies.
Right.
Everybody continues to live. The house doesn't burn down. The relationship doesn't end. And I think I just have to, sometimes you just have to say those things out loud. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. It doesn't necessarily happen every time, but sometimes it just has to stop. Sometimes you're doing it and you're uncomfortable, and sometimes it just has to stop.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
And again, he doesn't die. If he needs to, he can go take care of himself. He knows how. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. It's not like he's ever done that before. I mean, anyways, has this been a bit helpful, at least to strategize that possibility?
Yeah, it's super helpful. Thank you. I think I definitely want to give that a real try this time, and because I think it could be super helpful.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm not sure if this is the issue for you, but I think I remember this, I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know where it comes from, but I remember hearing this thing a lot in, I don't know, maybe the early 2000s. They used to say like men reach their sexual peak at like 25 or something, and women reach their sexual peak at 35. And I always thought it was kind of dumb. But when I think back on it, I think that what it could mean potentially is that there's a certain point when you get to an age where you're done with bad sex.
Right. And then you know what you want, like I thought my clitoris was inside of me until I was 19. Like, wow. I had no idea. Yeah.
No one showed you.
Know that. No, and I didn't know masturbation was a thing. Like, I didn't know that was like, I thought that was only for guys like that. That was very like frowned down upon in my high school. So like people would like whisper about like, oh, like I hear she, like it was very like negative. So yeah, it makes the message is not it. Yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the other, I think about, it makes me think about this time when I was in university. I was having a conversation with my girlfriends, one girlfriend in particular, and we were talking about sex, and I said something about orgasms and having them regularly. And she was like every time? And I was kind of like, yeah, why not? And she was like, no, every time, because she was just like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not a thing.
Right.
Like, you can't have an orgasm every time. And I'm like, yeah, you can. So I think people also need to hear that as well, not to put pressure, because that's a whole, I'm not a sex therapist. I'm not like, this is not my area of specialty, right? but at the same time, it is what it is. And so I think that we need to have that permission sometimes to, like, it doesn't have to, it's supposed to be fun. It's never supposed to hurt. If it's ever uncomfortable, it means stop. That's what it means. Right. And it means maybe switching positions, maybe even stopping and finishing in a different way. Like, it shouldn't be painful. And all of those things are options. And I, like I said, I do think the porn thing sets up this expectation that we're just supposed to be there for his no, we're not. No, you weren't put on this earth for his pleasure. No, you weren't. You're your own person. You get to have your own pleasure. He gets pleasure regardless. So I think that it would make sense, given the disparity there, where most of the time men finish, and obviously all of the time women don't finish, in that respect, like to orgasm. And so I think it makes sense that he can concede a little bit and make sure that you're happy. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Anyways, so hopefully that's helpful. I feel like that's probably what we have time for today. We'll talk about.
Thank you so much for diving into it.
You're welcome. I'm glad that we did. And again, I've done a few episodes. I think I'll link a couple episodes in the show notes. I have maybe a good re-listen for you as well. I have had actual, sex therapists / sex specialists on the show before to talk about some of these topics better than I can. And I think it's always a very important topic to go back to, because ultimately when you're charting, and especially in my field, these are the topics that come up, because I'm seeing the sex on the chart, right? So
that's it.
Definitely comes up. And then also another reason that it comes up is that I do have not a large percentage, but there is a percentage of clients who do experience painful sex, usually in a different respect. So often while they're on the pill, and that can be related to some of those hormonal issues. And then the low libido and difficulty reaching orgasm is definitely something that can be exacerbated by contraceptives as well. So not in every case, obviously, but in some cases. So it definitely does come up, and you're definitely not the only one. So I'll be curious to see what the responses are like to this episode. Yeah. And other women who've experienced similar things. So as we bring today to a close, first of all, did you have any other questions or anything, or are you good?
No, I'm great. Thank you for all of that.
Cool. And so for the listener who's thinking, okay, I'm thinking about coming off the pill and I'm scared, what, if anything, would you want to tell her?
I think just that the menstrual cycle is amazing and that you can learn so much about your body, and it's worth maybe that learning curve to really dive into it. And it's not anywhere near as hard as I thought it would be once you get in the groove. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds like the answer to the second question. Well, I'll just see if you have anything else to add. But for someone who's scared of, using fertility awareness, because in your case, you're not trying to have a baby right now.
No.
So you're definitely avoiding. So what would you want her to know if she's thinking about switching to fertility awareness?
I already feel like way more confident after taking your class for just like, I think we're 6 weeks in right now on charting my cycle, and like feeling confident that I can get to a point where I'll know how to avoid without having to use condoms every single time. So yeah, there's a way to avoid pregnancy for sure without having to be on hormonal contraception. And feel
awesome. Yes, couldn't agree more. It is possible, ladies.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Carter, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for bringing out a topic that really doesn't get talked about a ton. There's a lot of topics that kind of get, that we go into a lot, but this is one that doesn't get talked about a lot on the show. It really hasn't come up for a little bit too. So I feel like it's perfect timing. But thank you for being so open and vulnerable. I know that it's a little bit of a sensitive topic and not everyone would feel comfortable bringing it up. So I really appreciate your openness and willingness. And we hope, well, at least I hope, and I think most of the listeners are hoping for some amazing sex in your future with zero pain.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/413. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Carter. I feel like we really delved into a lot of important topics, and I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to kind of flesh out some of the possibilities around her main concern, which was the pain that she's been experiencing with sex. And through our conversation, it seemed to be a bit of a different scenario. You know, her pain started after she came off of contraceptives, not exactly sure why, but, you know, through our conversation and through the kind of questions and the different explorations, there did seem to be this possibility that it could be more related to the arousal cycle and that aspect of it. In this case, we really did look at some of the possibilities so that we can try to figure out which one it is. So if it's something hormonal, then potentially a hormonal solution could work. If it's something else, then going through, say, a pelvic floor physiotherapist for a full examination to determine if there's an issue could be helpful. And then if it is related to the arousal cycle and potentially jumping in too soon before she's comfortable and relaxed, then some of these other strategies might improve it. And ultimately, I suppose the next step is to give it a shot and see what happens. And if it doesn't make a difference at all, then we know that it's something deeper. But if it does make a difference and improve the situation, then we can kind of lean more towards potentially that it's more of an issue with that aspect of it. And so if you have personally had an experience similar to that, where it's not necessarily always painful, but if you've ever had the experience of sex being uncomfortable sometimes or even painful for one reason or another, hopefully today's episode has at least given you some ideas if you need to strategize around modifying your actions to be more in line with the natural kind of female arousal cycle. And also, if you've ever felt uncomfortable asking for what you need or asking your partner to, you know, slow down or to stop or to switch positions or whatever the case is, if you've ever felt a little bit uncomfortable doing that, then hopefully today's episode has given you permission and a good reminder that it is okay for you to ask for what you need and ensure that you're happy in this whole process. So with that said, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.